While many people may be migrating away from mainstream news, there are few better rundowns combined with thoughtful reporting than Rachel Maddow. Now, especially her nightly monologue, it's terrific. And last night, what she had to report about Trump's post-Putin call regarding NATO, it's freaking jaw-dropping. And not what you voted for. It's more great temperature taking from the MSNBC journalist that really fries this guy's burger.
And Rachel Maddow should be forced to resign. Nobody watches her anyway.
On the other side of this terrific piece from Rachel last night, we're going to show it to you right now. We'll all check out Rachel not only digging into Donald Trump's abiding affection for Vlad, the blackmailer, but also his plans for NATO and how this is all being perceived on Main Street, even in MAGAville. Now, after that, I'm going to run a great rebuttal to Agent Krasnov's earlier Maddow version from a random poster on TikTok. But first, and most importantly, Rachel last night.
All the different ways that Donald Trump and his top campaign donor, defendant Elon Musk, are terrifying and turning off even their own voters, as we saw in those focus groups in Michigan. And all the ways they are terrifying and turning off and angering people who live in Trump Republican districts for all the loss after loss after loss after loss they are being dealt in the courts. There's one other element of what's going on with Trump that I want to point out here as a matter of, I just think this needs to be factored in more regularly when we talk about the public reaction to Trump, when we talk about public opinion of what he's doing. Because there is one thing about his presidency that, I mean, for all of the other unpopular and failing things about this young presidency, there's one thing about this presidency that is just unprecedented in how radically out of step it is with the American people. There's such a difference between what Trump wants and what the American people want on one particular issue that I actually think it is not sustainable in normal small d democratic terms. So I want to stick a pin in this because I think this is important now and it's going to get more important as things get weirder and weirder. This is from the NBC News poll that just came out yesterday. Americans were asked, in the war between Russia and Ukraine, with which of those countries do you sympathize more? Ukraine, 61% of Americans said, I sympathize more with Ukraine. Russia, the proportion of Americans who say, I sympathize more with Russia is 2%. 2% sympathize with Russia. Americans are asked, okay, well, that's where your sympathies are. Where do you believe the president's sympathies are? Where do you think Trump's sympathies are? Ukraine, 8%. Russia, 49%. Overall, Trump is underwater by minus 13 points on his handling of the war between Russia and Ukraine. A significant majority of the public thinks that he is wrong in his handling of the Russia-Ukraine war. Americans asked specifically, hey, what's your view on Russia? The proportion of Americans who view Russia positively right now is 6%. The proportion of Americans who view Russia negatively is 68%. How about Vladimir Putin, the guy? How about himself? The proportion of Americans who have a positive view of Vladimir Putin is 3%. The proportion of Americans who have a negative view of Vladimir Putin is 84%. Okay? So the American view on this is very clear. And the American people are very aware of how different Trump's view is to their own. All right? And this is, it's a statistical oddity. I'm not sure there's ever been anything like this before in presidential politics. But this is part of what the Trump presidency means. And it accounts for some of the weirdest stuff in it. I mean, today, in the midst of all the other chaos that he is wreaking in our own government, right? They're today amid the news that they really are apparently going to go ahead with this change at Social Security. They're going to force 80,000 retired and disabled Americans every week to physically go in person to Social Security offices that they are also shutting down and firing people from by the thousands, as they announced today that they really are going to do that. There today amid the disaster scene at FDA headquarters, where they told 10,000 people to show up at an office that has 6,000 parking places with no chairs or offices for most of them. And that's how they're going to run the FDA now. There today amid the news that they've just, fired hundreds of dam operators and engineers who operate the hydroelectric dams in 17 western states. Accidentally fired all the people who keep the lights on and keep the dams safe there. I mean, there today, amid that sort of daily litany of that kind of wreckage, there's Donald Trump, twirling his hair and spending 2 hours on the phone with his bestie, Vladimir Putin. 2 hours on the phone, more than 2 hours on the phone, talking to his friend, Vladimir Putin, who has, again, a 3% approval rating with the American people, because the American people know who he is. But for Donald Trump, there is nothing Vladimir Putin has done that is wrong. There is nothing Putin has done that he disagrees with. And there is nothing Putin has asked of him that he has not given and more. I mean, literally, as soon as he got off the phone today, we got word via NBC News that Trump now would like the United States to give up its military leadership role in NATO. The American military command of NATO has been in force since Eisenhower. Trump's going to give it up. It's weird, right? He didn't campaign on that. So many of the weirdest things about the Trump presidency, and a Trump presidency that is deeply dissatisfying even to people who voted for him, right? For a Trump presidency where he's underwater on almost everything he's doing. For a Trump presidency where he's more deeply underwater on his signature issue of the economy than he's ever been in his entire life in public office. In a Trump presidency where he loses more times in court on a single day than most presidents lose in court in a term. The weirdest stuff that Donald Trump is doing seems to relate to his relationship with and affinity for a foreign dictator for whom the American people give approval ratings of 3%. I mean, Trump is now talking, he's now said multiple times in public, that our border with Canada is an artificial boundary. That's how he's described it, an artificial boundary. What is that? Where is that from? Well, that is the way that Vladimir Putin talks about Ukraine. It's not the way any American has ever talked about North America ever before, but Trump now talks about Canada the way Putin talks about Ukraine. I mean, as you heard those Trump voters lament at the top of the show, Trump is doing all this stuff he never campaigned on. He is talking about a U.S. military invasion into Mexico. He is talking about a U.S. annexation of Canada. He is talking about the United States going to war with Denmark, which means NATO, in order to seize Greenland. He has talked about wanting to seize Gaza. He has talked about wanting to seize Panama and has ordered the Pentagon to develop war plans for U.S. troops invading Panama. Where did all this come from? I mean, for all the stuff he's doing, at least a lot of it was in the campaign. Maybe people didn't believe him. You heard those Trump voters there saying, I didn't know he'd actually do it. But this is stuff he didn't talk about at his rallies. He didn't publish tweets about this stuff. He didn't air ads about it. He didn't campaign on it. You didn't hear Panama and Greenland and Canada in the campaign, did you? But it's apparently what he is planning on doing now that he is in office, while he is talking frequently and at exorbitant length with his friend Vladimir Putin, who the American people approve of at a rate of 3%. I think this has to be a bigger part of what we think of when we think about the American public's reaction to the Trump presidency and American public opinion about Trump's behavior. When that NBC poll came out this week, pollster Jeff Horwit of Hart Research Associates, who conducted that poll along with a Republican pollster, Bill McInturff of Public Opinion Strategies, he said this about those Putin and Russia numbers and how differently the American people perceive Russia and how they believe their president perceives Russia. Hart said this, he said, quote, I cannot recall a moment in history when American public opinion and voters' views of a president as to which country they are more aligned with have been more in conflict with each other. The American public in conflict with its president on this point, which seems to be driving more and more of what this president is doing. The American people very clearly are very much against Vladimir Putin. The American president is very much for him. And that, amid everything else, is a test for us. Because in a democracy, that sort of divide should be unsustainable. That should be correctable by democratic means.
And once again, Rachel gives us words to resist by. And while we started today's piece with your reigning POTUS's disdain for the Rhea Ripley of MSNBC, here's a great TikTok post, a citizen promo that really hits the mark.
Yeah, so now Trump is demanding that Rachel Maddow be forced to resign. Can you think of a higher compliment to be paid to any journalist anywhere than have Trump say you should be forced to resign? I would be so proud and glad, and thank you for polishing my brand image as a journalist whose duty it is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And by the way, go after liars wherever you find them and expose them. Thank you, Rachel Maddow. You're a hero.